Friday, and thrilled to be here talking to the chamber today. And I just want to, this is actually a great setup because I'm very conversational and want to kind of keep it casual, but also just tell you about my story, and how I took my adversity and challenges I faced and how it led into what I'm doing now, kind of a new mission that I otherwise probably would not have been on. And then at the end, would love to take any questions. But I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. Actually, my family still lives in Strongsville, and I was born and raised here, and went to school at St. Ignatius in downtown Cleveland. And it was really while I was at Ignatius that my life kind of and my idea for what it meant to live life started to take hold. I remember I was getting ready to lead a retreat, and I was in the campus ministry room one evening after school doing some of the prep work with the other students. And I went, and for some reason I had closed this door, and I looked behind the door, and there was this poster that was hanging on the back of the door, with the quote, "You only live once, but if you live right, once is enough." And it had this guy with his arms out diving off a cliff silhouetted by the sun. It was just a really powerful image, but that quote, for some reason at that particular time in my life, literally just stopped me in my tracks. And I remember thinking, that's just a great mantra to live life by. And I carried that with me throughout my high school career and into my life. And I really had kind of set the idea in my head that you get one go around, but if you do it right, once is enough. And I want to try to take advantage of all the opportunities that life may put in front of me, and really experience it all. And as they say, kind of be used up at the end of my life, and not regret having not done something. And I set out to live my life that way. And whether it was personal endeavors or professional endeavors, really tried to seize life by the horns. On the fun side of things and the personal side of things, went skydiving several times, rock climbing, whitewater rafting, even, believe it or not, rode bulls on a rodeo circuit for 2 years across Ohio and Indiana, and just ex- whatever I could get my hands on and could experiment with and try as far as just different personal endeavors, I did. From a professional standpoint, I really tried to attack life with that same kind of reckless abandon. I spent some time living in China as well as living in England, working abroad, and studied Chinese at Lehigh University, and ultimately went on to get my MBA at the University of Michigan as well. So really just tried to throw myself into everything. And that led to a very successful career, which ultimately brought me back to Cleveland, working for a Berkshire Hathaway subsidiary over in Bedford Heights for a while. Prior to that, I was in Toledo. Prior to that, and while there is where I had met my wife, and uh, we moved to Virginia, and got married, and eventually decided it was time to start a family, and we wanted to move back to Ohio. And we moved back to Cleveland in August, September timeframe of 2008. Was actually living in Beechwood for a while, and then moved to the West Side to give the West Side a try to see what we liked better, and moved to the West Side around February of 2009. And we were getting ready to spend the summer, and had actually talked about starting to plan a family that fall. And the July 4th holiday came around, and uh, um, my wife's parents had a cottage up in Coldwater Lake, Michigan, where we had spent a tremendous amount of time and had always been up there. And we were house shopping at the time, but figured, you know what, we'll go up for a night, for a day, see the family, see the kids, my nieces and nephews, and just have a nice little relaxing Fourth of July. So we drove up there on July 3rd, and we got up there about 2.5, 3 hours away, and had just finished eating dinner. It was a beautiful day. Was sitting outside. I was with Christy, my wife at the time, with her father, and she came out of the house and said, "You're never going to believe this. I just looked online, and they're talking about rainstorms coming in." And I looked outside. I'm looking around. It's just a beautiful day, but I'm like, all right, well. Supposedly weathermen know more than I do when it comes to the weather. So if they're saying it's going to rain, it's going to rain. And I loved being in the water. Any chance I could get to swim or to just be in the water would always take advantage of it. So I went inside, changed in my suit, came back outside. Everyone else was still inside cleaning up and just relaxing after dinner. So by myself, I walked down. The house is situated on a hill, and it's probably about 50 vertical feet up. But there's a gradual walk down to the dock, which goes out about another 20 yards or so to the lake. So a good deal from the house. So I walked down there and got to the end of the dock, and this is an area I knew well. A couple of weeks earlier, I had been in that same spot teaching my niece and nephew how to swim, and was always in there and jumping off the dock and diving from that spot. But for whatever reason, I took my shirt off. I dove in, and that moment, things worked out differently than they had in the past. And I just careened full force right into the bottom of the lake bed. And as soon as I broke the plane of the water, my head just smashed into that soggy bottom. And I never lost consciousness, but right away, felt the twinge and my body just go numb, and I knew what had happened. And I had played football. I was a member of the national championship team at Ignatius, and had played baseball and rugby at Lehigh and into my college years. So I'd been an athlete throughout my life and had my share of little injuries, whether it was stingers or shoulder issues or other things. So I knew a thing or two about what it felt sometimes when you get a nerve tweaked, but right away knew this was different. There wasn't any pain, any discomfort. There was just nothing, except for the fact that I was floating face down in about 2 feet of water, 2.5 feet of water. 33 inches is where they measured the water where I dove, and was conscious, staring there at the lake bed, could, but just couldn't bring myself to move, to push myself up, to get a breath, or to scream for help. And things happened fast, but at the same point in time, I remember all of it, and it seemed to drag on. And right after I had hit my head and broke my neck and realized, oh boy, this is it. This is not good. I'm paralyzed in the blink of an eye. I'm floating here in water. Everyone else is up in the house. I can't breathe. I can't scream. I can't push for help. Um, this obviously isn't good. As that started to sink in really quickly, my heart just started to beat pretty quickly, and pretty soon was beating so fast and so loud that it was just a deafening boom, 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 that just filled the whole lake. And that's all I could hear was just this loud, quick, rapid beating of my heart. And the first emotion I felt right away when I realized what had happened was guilt. I just felt horrible for my wife. I just thought, oh my God, what have I done? I've just ruined her life. I just felt selfish, and like I had just chose to dive into the water, even though it wasn't reckless, or I wasn't, you know, doing anything that hadn't done 100 times for whatever reason. I just, that moment, I just felt that I had just, ruined all of her life and her whole future. And I just had this tremendous feeling of guilt, and then quickly started to feel sad, and fearful, realizing that, as I talk about in my book, but it's really surreal when you're at that moment where, everyone has a close call in their life where they're like, wow, I could have died just doing that, or whether it's in a car or something else. But this, at that moment in time, death was imminent. There was no like, oh, I wonder how I'm going to get through this. This was it. Like I said, I couldn't move, and I was literally drowning in water, and there was no one around. And I knew, clear as I know, who I am today, that I was going to die. And that guilt was quickly replaced by just fear. And that fear, was also accompanied with an overwhelming sense of sadness, and just knowing that I was never going to be able to, hug my wife again, or my family, or tell them that I love them. or just say goodbye to anyone. That was it. I was just going to die cold, alone, and wet, just in dirty lake water. And like I said, all this was happening probably over a course of a couple minutes, but it was moving so fast yet so slow at the same time. And when I realized and finally accepted the fact that this is it, I said a prayer. I just asked God to look after my family, my wife, and those that I couldn't be able to help, and just forgive me for any sins I had, and hopefully accept me into heaven. And then there was really nothing else to do. And the only thing I could think to do to just prolong the inevitable was I opened up my mouth and swallowed as much water as I could to drown myself. And that was the last thing I remember. And I ended up, awakening in a hospital bed. Uh, you know, whether it was a couple days later, a day later, I remember a lot of what had happened in the previous or in the subsequent days that followed. But I always tell people it was like all my memories were taken and put in a pillowcase, shaken up, and just pulled out randomly. So there was no linear sense of time. I can't tell you what happened first, what happened second, but I remember most of the events that happened. But I just remember waking up and just being incredibly aware of what had happened, but still not totally and fully grasping the magnitude of the situation. Christy had told me at one point, I kept asking her. And when I say asking, I'm talking about a whisper. I had no voice. I couldn't breathe on my own. I was on a ventilator. I couldn't talk, but I just kept wanting to go back to the lake. I didn't want to be in a hospital anymore. I kept asking her, "Can we go back to the lake?" And I just had a tremendous sense of I was scared, I was anxious, confused, everything you can think of, and had survived a 8-hour surgery, which the doctors ended up telling Christy that it was the third worst injury that the lead surgeon had ever seen in his life. I had shattered my neck from the C1 to the C6, and right where the C3 vertebrae is, had completely dislocated it an ungodly 60 degrees in the wrong direction, and it's severed the spinal cord. And there was just a tremendous amount of damage, as you can imagine. And they did the best they could with the surgery, and then told my family the rest was in God's hands, and just my body's ability to just survive as best it could. But it was going to be a very difficult, and they had to prepare themselves for the journey, and probably the immediate few days I might not survive. So like I said, things were I don't have a sense of what day it was or how long it had been that I'd been in the hospital, but things were pretty bad, and I was just sitting there and laying there, unable to breathe on my own, like I said, and even though I couldn't feel anything per se, I was in just a tremendous amount of pain. I couldn't really talk. I couldn't communicate. My body was getting flipped around left and right when nurses would come in to do things, and it was just it was just the worst feeling. And on top of that, the physical was just the constant battles in my mind of just the depression, the anxiety, the confusion, feeling alone, feeling scared, not knowing what's going on. I was on some pretty intense medication, was having just horrific hallucinations of people doing things to my family, just almost like I felt like I was in hell. And who knows if I was at one point, it was just very, very surreal. But like I said, I was aware enough to know what had happened, and I didn't want to live. I kept praying, if there's a way for me to die somehow, please kill me, because I there's no way I can live like this. This is just too much. And I kept having these dreams and these ideas and fascinations that maybe I could convince my wife or one of the nurses to slip rat poisoning or something into my IV just to end it, because this was no way to live. And then one day, Christy came in and she was there by my side and said, "Scott, the doctor has to come in and talk to you." And like I said, I couldn't speak. I was using a blink board. I would have to blink my eyes to to get to the letter I wanted to try to communicate with people. But she asked me, she said, do you want anyone in the room? And I said, yeah, you. So she was with me, and this doctor came in, and looked like a drill sergeant, just very burly guy, matter of fact, buzz cut hair, and just no real bedside manner or tact to him. He just kind of walked in and was at our side, and he knew he wanted to make sure I was lucid enough to understand the conversation. And when he was confident that I was with it all, he then proceeded very matter of factly to just go through this list of things I was never going to do. And he said, Scott, you're never going to, you've been in an accident, you've broken your neck, it's bad. And I want you to realize that you're never going to breathe on your own again. You're never going to move any part of your body again. Probably never going to be able to eat or swallow again. Um, you're definitely never going to have any chance at walking again. And for the most part, it's going to be tough for you to just, be out of bed or be in a wheelchair for any long periods of time. Your life pretty much as you know it is done. And this is a new life. And if you continue to progress, it's not going to get much better. I just need you to be aware of that. I didn't even get the proverbial 1% chance, or he just matter of factly laid it all out as if he knew already the end result. And I was in Michigan, as I mentioned, in a hospital bed up in Kalamazoo. So Michigan law requires that people are given the option whether or not they want to continue to live their life if they're on artificial means, and they're of enough sound mind to make that decision. So after he had gone through this whole litany of all these things I'll never do, he goes, okay, Scott, I now have to ask you a question. Do you want to live? And this was my chance. I had been pretty much begging and pleading to God to just somehow kill me, these previous couple days where I was in bed. Turns out I think this was about 8 or 9 days in. It would turn out when he was there when we were having this talk. But all this time I had just been thinking, I don't want to live. And here was now my chance. Yet at that moment, somehow, and when I look back, I to this day will say it was, it was God, it was the Holy Spirit that had somehow come into me. But with as much voice as I could muster, and really without a second thought, I just thought of my family, my wife, my just my life that still wasn't finished, and I said yes, yes, I want to live. And then I kind of passed out, and I guess my wife ran out into the hallway with the family, and they were ecstatic, all celebrating. And I would come to find out that earlier that day there was a gentleman who had also broken his neck a few rooms down, and he had been given that same choice, but told that he didn't want to live anymore, and they had taken him off the vent, and he died. And my family had to sit there and watch him get wheeled out of the room, and watch his family crying, and they had said goodbye to him. And now they were in the hallway as my wife was in the room with me, wondering what decision I was going to make. So obviously they were thrilled, but we knew we had a long road ahead of us. And just because I decided I wanted to live, things didn't get easier. In fact, they got worse. I continued to code. Would end up coding 5 different times, and over the next several months. But in that hospital, there were 3 separate occasions where my family was called to my room to basically say goodbye to me. And somehow my heart kept, coming back, and they were able to bring me back. But the doctor just kept telling my family, we don't know if we can keep doing this. The heart's only so strong, and and there's only so much one can take. And at any moment in time, his heart can give out. It's been through a lot. It was constantly being over the next several months. Once I was released from the hospital and life flighted to Metro Health in Cleveland here, where I began my rehab, and was constantly battling infection, pneumonia, being shuttled back and forth from the ICU to the rehab floor. So just a very, very difficult time. And all along the way, I was just constantly depressed, anxious, scared, just kept questioning God's will for me, and why this had happened. So it was a very challenging time. And I ended up being in the hospital for 6 months. But I don't remember the exact day or moment, but at some point, I began to. I'd been raised by my family to be very positive, and my dad was a very motivational person. He was a salesman and always worked in business for himself. And from the time I was, able to walk and talk and crawl as a kid, he was always just preaching the power of positivity, and he was a big proponent of positive thinking. So that had always been with me. So I had that strong foundation, but he would sit at my bedside, just constantly read stories and tell me, you're going to beat this and you are going to get stronger. And somewhere along the line, I just started to realize that, okay, it is going to be up to me. Um, I have all the odds in the world against me, but I'm alive. I'm still here. I have a great family support network. If I'm going to get through this, a lot of it, I'm going to have to rely on my inner strength and my mental fortitude, because while it was a physical injury, as I would come to find out, 99% of it was mental, and being able to strengthen that mental side of things. I wasn't real. I would not be able to get physically stronger until I could mentally, get myself in a good position. So I continued to work in therapy, continued to, deal with just the constant one step forward, three steps back, and all the setbacks, whether it was pneumonia, kidney issues, pulmonary issues, skin integrity issues. Just there was always something. But each day, each little inch by inch, I was able to kind of crawl forward and make progress. And eventually, after 6 months, was released into into a nursing home, and went into the nursing home thinking I'd be there for a couple of weeks while Christy got the apartment together to figure out our next steps. But she soon decided that this wasn't the life that she had signed up for, and she wasn't prepared to move forward. And that kind of felt like break my neck all over again. I was working so hard to get stronger, not just for myself but for her as well. And now she had decided that she didn't want to you know be married anymore. So that couple of weeks turned into a 14-month stay in a nursing home while it was back to square one, figuring out what was next. And that was a challenge. I mean, as you can imagine, I was 33 years old when this had happened, and here I was in a nursing home, trying to wake up every day with that go 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 mentality and wanting to get stronger, but being surrounded, as I tell people, as I say, by people that were with that no 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 mentality and just literally waiting to just die. It was a very just probably the last place in the world you'd want to be, to try to kind of find that positive attitude to keep moving forward. But through prayer and my faith, as well as through my family and friends and the support network I had, I continued to move forward, even though it was a dismantling of my previous life. I had to really learn to all over again to build this, build myself back up and decide, okay, what's life going to look like? And eventually, through all those ordeals, fast forward now to the point where I was able to get out of the hospital and to get home, to get into an apartment and try to uh, get ready to move forward. And something I didn't mention when I was talking to the group last Friday, but I talk about it in my book. But I remember that first night at home. I was in the apartment, and had been set up, and we had nursing there and everything. And I was with my dad and sister. They were in my room hanging out, and they left. And I remember just that first night, just having an incredible, overwhelming sense of depression. And it was probably the most sad I had been since breaking my neck. And I was just laying in bed, and people were like, "Well, might think, why were you so sad?" And I realized, well, I had worked so hard to get better and to get out of the hospital. And then I got to the nursing home. I accomplished that. And then I had worked so hard to get stronger while at the nursing home and eventually get out, after 21 months, was now out of an institution in my own place. And I had now done that. But here I was, my wife was gone. My finances had been decimated. Everything I had worked for had been gone. and I'd achieved these goals of some type of independence, of getting back home on my own. But now what? I mean, what was next? I felt like I didn't have anything to live for. And this incredible wave of depression came over with me, and I went to sleep that night just with tears in my eyes. But then I picked myself up, figuratively, and began to continue to move forward. And it was just the proverbial one foot forward in front of the other, just trying to make progress, just taking little things at a time, and trying to take each little victory and parlaying it into something bigger. And eventually, I continued to get stronger, mentally, physically. I developed. While I was in a nursing home, my therapy had been stopped by insurance. They had determined, oh, you're not walking, you're not moving, you've plateaued. So we're going to stop your therapy. And the one thing that had kept me positive and kept me going was that therapy. But fortunately, because of my family and friends and strong social network, they had stepped up and provided the funds to allow me to continue getting that therapy. But I was thinking about that one night laying in my apartment, like, this is ridiculous. There's people that aren't in my situation that don't have the social network that I have, or the, access to donations to continue to get therapy. What are they to do? Like, when insurance kind of kicks them to the curb. So I thought about that, and I thought about just the idea of not being able to have access to things that you need, that are literally life changing, to help you get stronger. And I was like, this just isn't right. So that whole idea and that impetus eventually found its way into me forming a nonprofit in August of 2011 called Getting Back Up, where we provide exercise-based therapy services and adaptable products to people all across the country with spinal cord injuries, who were their last resort of lending, of funding, I should say, to get them the services they need. So I really, threw myself into that idea, and that's, as of today, has grown into a tremendous nonprofit. And I really started to find myself getting even stronger and better, as I continued to help others. And I thought back to this whole life I had lived, and that idea of that motto on that poster of, you only living once, but if you live right once is enough. And how everything I had set out to do was very, um, not intentional, but self-centered to a certain extent when you think about it in hindsight, because it was all about, bettering my life. But now here I was, and I was realizing I was having the chance to kind of help other people, and I found that just so rewarding and so fulfilling. And eventually, just was able to parlay my experience into, um, helping others, whether it was through the foundation, or through motivational speaking, and not even motivational speaking, but just being able to reach other individuals, whether they were in a hospital or where else, being called to go talk with others, and then share my story to different organizations, and helping people that were dealing with all kinds of adversity in their life, to know that, look, I mean, we're all going to be facing challenges, but we can learn from one another. I just got so much fulfillment and so much joy out of being able to help others, that I really took that on as my new mission, and ultimately signed on with an organization out of LA called Adversity to Advocacy. And it's all about remarkable individuals, just different individuals who have had some pretty intense things happen in their life, but have been able to use those experiences to form some type of advocacy work. And I was proud to sign on with that group, and ultimately joined an organization in Cleveland called LEAP, and which is Linking Employment Abilities and Potential, and they're headquartered out of downtown Cleveland, and became a board member for them, which I still serve on today as the vice president. And just being able to just have all these different opportunities present to me that I probably otherwise never would have pursued, or would have thought of taking that on as my mission. But the more and more I continued to find myself with the ability to help others, just the stronger it made me. And I started to realize that, as crazy as it sounds, this injury, my accident, is a gift, um, in a way, a gift to others, but also a gift to me, because it's really allowed me to find some purpose and fulfillment that I otherwise might not have had, had this not happened. And as you know, as shitty as the situation was with Christy leaving and um, watching everything I had worked for kind of be taken from me, there was also other gifts that were being presented, new relationships I was forming, and just new opportunities that I was experiencing that I kind of realized that these are gifts and they are small miracles. And in some ways, I am more lucky than people who have their full body use of their body walking around, but just feel stuck or mentally just aren't in a good place. And I really set out to do what I could to help others that were dealing with that. Fast forward through all those years, I've been able to continue with the speaking, with the with getting back up with the foundation. I recently published a memoir in July of 2019, as Lilia mentioned, called Headstrong: How a Broken Neck Strengthened My Spirit, where I really talk about my story and just how I've been able to take tragedy and in a way, as cliche as it is, kind of turn it into triumph. But there's five I call them absolute truths that I talk about in the book that I lay out that I just want to share real quick because I think they can apply to everyone regardless of the situation you find yourself in. But we're all going to face adversity at some point in our lives. It might not be as traumatic or as devastating as a broken neck, but whether it's the loss of a loved one, whether it's dealing with our own health and a prognosis, or challenging situations with family, with children, whatever it is, there's all gonna be time. We're all gonna face that time, unfortunately, where we just we feel like we got nothing in the tank. Our reserves aren't there, and we just don't know what it is. How we can get through the challenge that we find in front of us. And but these five truths, so to speak, that I've kind of really come to realize, um, they've helped me tremendously. I wouldn't be sharing them if I thought it was just lip service. And while they're nothing remarkable, nothing that I invented or made up, it's just common sense. When you really break it down and apply them, though, they can just make tremendous differences in your life. And the first thing that I've really come to learn and appreciate it is, it all starts with the right attitude. And as they say, attitude equals altitude. And when I was playing baseball, I used to have the word attitude that was written under the brim of my hat. Whenever I took my hat off or put my hat on, the first thing I saw was that word attitude. So I'd always kind of lived with the idea of, let's determine the right attitude, but never really appreciated it fully until, I broke my neck and found myself in a situation. But it's the one
Yep.
thing that we can control and that I could still control. And everything could be taken from me and taken from us, but we have the ability, as hard as it might be, we have the ability to control our own attitude and determine what that attitude is. And as I often say, and I've found out, where the mind goes, the body will follow. So I really have become a strong proponent and with all my heart believe that, it all starts with the right attitude. The second lesson I've learned is, in truth, is, you know, we're not defined by our adversity. Although it might seem like that, we're not. And I use the example of, if you take the word disabled and you look up synonyms for this word, you're going to find some pretty ugly words in the thesaurus. Words like diseased, decrepit, broken, useless, wasted, uh, defunct, and that's not how I feel about myself. I might have a disability, but I'm certainly not disabled. I'm still Scott. I still have a lot to offer. I still have a strong mind, a powerful intellect, um, the ability to appreciate things and want to do more. So, at times we're going to find ourselves kind of in a rut, but whatever that disability or that challenge or that adversity that we're facing at that moment, that doesn't define us, and we shouldn't let it define us. It's how we respond to those challenges that we should define ourselves by. And again, these are just simple adages, simple ideas, but so powerful when they're put to use. The third thing I've come to discover is, inch by inch is a cinch, yard by yard it's awfully hard. And as the cliche goes, Rome wasn't built in a day, or the a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. But I was this go-getter, this go impatient kind of guy who wanted to do everything and do it right now. And with a spinal cord injury, you're really humbled, and you learn that, look, things aren't going to happen overnight. Things take time, and really, really good things, they take a lot of time. But you got to put in the work, and you got to be willing to just achieve those inches and work for those inches. You might not be working you might not make tremendous progress all at once, but those inches will, if you continue to achieve those little victories and celebrate those little victories, just 1 inch at a time, it's going to add up into those feet, yards into miles. And in time, you're going to look back and realize, wow, I have made a lot of progress. This, what seemed completely impossible ordeal, I've been able to get through it. I've been able to move forward, and just focusing on 1 inch at a time. Um, Fourth absolute truth is, I don't have to really tell anyone, but there'll be good days and there'll be bad days. And I had good days and bad days before my injury. So why should I think that since my injury, I should only be looking forward to good days? You're going to continue to find yourself hit with problems and challenges in life, and just because you might break your neck, or you might go through something pretty horrific, doesn't mean you're now immune, and you put your time in and you get a free pass. The world doesn't work that way. You can get, you hear about good things happen, or horrible things happening to good people time and time again. Unfortunately, that's the way of the world. There's going to be bad things that continue to happen, but the important thing to remember is that, look, you've gotten through the worst before. There's no reason why you can't get through it again. And each time you get through those challenges, whether you realize it or not, you're accumulating these tools for your mental toolbox that will be at your disposal when you face your next challenge. And while each challenge might seem worse than before, and you might be telling yourself, all right, there's no way I can do this, you can, and you will. And you just have to remember that, you know, you've had those good days and you've had bad days in the past, but they didn't last forever. You can have a stretch of great weather and beautiful sunshine, and all of a sudden for a week it just rains, and it might feel like, oh, this whole summer, this whole time is ruined. But the rain's not going to last forever, and the sun is going to come back out. So just knowing that you are going to have those good days, um, again, is important to remember. And then the fifth absolute truth that I've come to appreciate and realize is, it's all relative. Now, it's easy to compare ourselves to other people with our situations, and we can go through life wanting to compare ourselves. And to some extent, that might be good. It might motivate you, but you have to also realize that everyone's situation is unique, and what you may see on the surface doesn't tell the whole story. And our problems are relative. No one's problems are worse than another, because we all deal with them differently, and we all have different tools at our disposal, and we all have a different mindset that we choose to attack our problems. So it doesn't help to compare yourself to someone thinking my situation's worse, or they don't really know anything because they haven't gone through what I've gone through. Everyone deals with their own challenges in their own way, but just as someone might have it better than us, someone's always going to have it worse, someone's always going to have it better. Things really are relative, and we have to focus on our own situation, what we control, and really kind of play and live within our own silo to to truly be happy, and to make the progress, and to measure the progress in the way that is meaningful. Um, so those are those five things, and then I want to leave you with a bonus truth that I learned, and I have a little example of the best way to sum that up. But keep the faith and believe. And I realize, for some people, well, what does that mean? And it's so hard. Yeah, you know, just keep the faith and believe, and things will get better. It doesn't always work that way, and we have to put in the work to get better. As the saying goes, God helps those who help themselves. But just keeping that positive mindset, keeping that faith, believing in good things to come, can make a tremendous difference, and it has made a difference in my life. And the example I just want to share that I think sums this up is I always, even when I tell the story, I always get goosebumps. But I was 16 years old, It was 19. Um,
Scott, you're muted.
Go to sleep.
There we
Go
go.
to
You're
sleep.
back. Oh, you're muted again.
Go to sleep. Okay.
You're good.
Sorry, I think I warned you with this voice software. Sometimes it'll. But did you hear me talking about when I was 16? Okay, I was talking about keep the faith and believe. And the best story I can sum this up with is when I was 16 years old. It was 1992. I was on the floor of my house, my parents' house in Strongsville, and I was reading a Sports Illustrated article, and it was about a football player named Dennis Byrd, and he played for the New York Jets, and he went to make a tackle during a game, and he broke his neck, and here he found himself laying on the the turf of Meadowlands Arena, unable to move, paralyzed, realizing what had just happened, and he passed out. And when he awoke a couple days later in a hospital bed, he looked up, and on the ceiling above his bed was this scripture verse, Romans 8:18, that had been scrawled out on a poster board. And that verse reads, "For I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory that shall be revealed in us." And and I just remember reading that story and how powerful that verse was. And at that moment, got up, went over to the desk that was in my room, and literally typed that verse out on an old word processor, folded it up on a piece of paper, and tucked it away in my wallet. And here I was, this 16-year-old, this sophomore who's interested in things like girls and trying to get beer and all these other things in life. But for some reason at that moment, kind of similar to that poster I saw on the back of the door at Ignatius, that verse just struck a chord with me. I wrote it down and tucked it away. And for the next couple decades of my life, there really wasn't a week that went by where at some point in time I didn't pull out that verse, read it, and just remind myself that, hey, there is a plan, stay the course, glory will be revealed. And now fast forward, it's 17 years later, I'm 33, this ex-football player, I break my neck, and I awake in a hospital bed. And unbeknownst to me, my sister-in-law had gone into my wallet, had found that verse, and had transcribed it on a beautiful, in calligraphy, on a beautiful piece of poster board. And now when I looked up, that was what I saw hanging above my hospital bed. It was almost like full circle. I was just had once 17 years earlier just read about this story of a guy who broke his neck and looked at that verse to draw him strength, and didn't realize at the time, obviously I had no idea what was going to happen, but just felt compelled to remember that story, to write that verse down and carry that verse throughout with me throughout my life. And now 17 years later, I was in that situation, and it was me looking at that verse. And at that moment, and just throughout my experience since I've broken my neck, I'm looking at it right now. I have that thing hanging up in my wall. It just it's always been to remind me that glory will be revealed in us, and it might not be the way we think or the way we had planned for, but just keep the faith and believe, and we will reach it. And that's the best way I have to sum up that that kind of last point. And I want to come back and answer some questions and talk a little bit more about my book or other questions you might have. But I want to just close my little talk here. I sent a video for Lily, and I want her to play that right now, about 3 minutes long, and then I'd be happy to take some questions.
Can you guys all see this? Yeah, okay.
something you already know. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, and nobody is gonna hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done. Now, if you know what you're worth, then go out and get what you're worth. But you gotta be willing to take the hit and not pointing fingers saying you ain't where you want to be because of him or her or anybody. Cowards do that, and that ain't you. You're better than that. We're in hell right now, gentlemen. Believe me. And we can stay here, get the shit kicked out of us, or we can fight our way back into the light. We can climb out of hell, 1 inch at a time. This kid's gonna be the best kid in the world. He's gonna be somebody better than anybody ever do. The inches we need are everywhere around us. Every minute, every second. On it, we fight for that inch. This team, we tear ourselves and everyone else around us to pieces for that inch. I'll tell you this, in any fight, it's the guy who's willing to die who's going to win that inch. And I know if I'm going to have any fight, it's because I'm still willing to fight and die for that inch. That's what living is. I will show you how great I am.
So thank you. That's that's my story, and I'm sticking to it, as they say. And I'd love to answer any questions you might have, but I appreciate the time to share my story with the group today.
Thank you so much, Scott, on behalf of everyone that's here. I know that a couple of people had to jump off because they had other commitments, but everybody so far has typed into the chat how inspiring your story was and how they're grateful that you were here to speak to us today. I want to say that I think that your story is very timely. Obviously, like you said, not every situation is a broken neck when we're going through adversity, right? But I think all of us, from a business perspective, from a personal perspective, we can all relate, especially with the past year presenting us with the challenges that it has, right? And so I know a lot of businesses are feeling kind of hopeless, like they can't possibly overcome what this past year has dealt to them. I know parents, myself included, who are thinking, what has this past year done to our children and how do we help them come through this? So it's really inspirational to hear someone who made the decision and continues to make the decision to have a positive outlook on the adversity that's dealt your way, right? Because we could all just wallow in our sorrows, and we have to make the decision daily to move forward. So I want to thank you. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to either type them into the chat or to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask them directly.
And if I can also, real quick here, just give a shameless plug. My website is scottwfedor.com, but you can subscribe there if you want to continue to follow my journey. I do postings probably once or twice a month, and you can also contact me. So if there's anything that question you might want to talk about or something that comes up, it's pretty easy to get to get a hold of me that way. But I love hearing from people reaching out and helping in any way I can. So thanks.
I know I want to buy you a beer and sit down and have a conversation, but we'll talk about that offline.
Gladly take you up on that. Yeah.
I'm heading to Westlake as soon as we're done here, but
There you go.
I won't surprise visit you. It's okay.
Oh, I'll tell you what, especially once it gets nice here, I'd love to sit outside and have a beer or wine with all you guys. It'd be great. So.
Absolutely. Again, in the chat, we're getting lots of messages of positivity and thanking you for your perspective and for being here to speak with us. Does anybody have any questions? No, I've got one for you, Scott.
Sure.
This has opened up the door for you to, you said, do a lot of different speaking engagements. Do you have a story of a particularly favorite situation that you had speaking to a group, or connecting with someone after an engagement like that you could speak to?
Yeah, actually there's one that comes to mind right away when you said I was at that hospital in Kalamazoo, Bronson Methodist, great hospital, great doctors, obviously saved my life, but a lot of them didn't give me much of a prognosis. But a couple of years ago, this would have been, I think it was in, I want to say maybe around 2017, the nurse that was on that air flight who intubated me in the air flight wrote to me and asked me if I would come speak to their conference. So I went up there for a couple days and had the chance to, it was a big conference by about 200-300 people, but had the chance to speak and tell my story. But the guy who spoke right before me was the doctor who had said, not the one that came into my room bedside, but another one who had told my family how challenging and difficult this was going to be. And he kind of presented my story as a case study to the whole group. And then he turned it over to me. And I remember just saying, man, my little icebreaker was I'd hate to be that guy, because just the way he had described the story, the whole group was just pretty blown away. But then here they were seeing me now, telling my story, my own words. And before I even started to speak, it was a pretty powerful moment just for me as well as for for all the group. And it was a chance to just show them that, hey, look, miracles do happen and things do get better. And it was also a chance for me to say thank you, to all the different nurses. And I went back to the room where I was and on the wing and just to say thank you for all the work they had done. But that was a pretty powerful moment to go back and share my story with those who might have wondered whatever happened to that guy.
I have a question. So are your books available in audiobooks?
They are. They're paperback, hardcover, Kindle version, and then an audiobook. And I narrate the audiobook. It's my own voice. So that's available on Audible or on Amazon.com as well. And the girl who wrote the foreword was kind enough to narrate the foreword. She actually reads her part, but it is my voice audiobook.
Is it just the Headstrong book or whatever?
Right now it's just Headstrong. And like I was telling for those that are joined before we had started, I was mentioning to a couple people that I'm toying with the idea of writing another book. Haven't finalized that yet. I'm still kind of outlining and seeing if it has any legs to stand on, so to speak. But I still have more. I love writing, so there might be something in the future coming out. But yep, for right now, I have the books as well as the audiobook available. And like I said, it's Amazon or Audible sells the audiobooks.
It's like I've become a groupie. I'm a Scott groupie.
Yeah. You're welcome. So I've had worse groupies. So
yeah, I know. Thanks. Appreciate that.
Just make sure you don't cross the line from groupie to stop.
Yeah.
Then we have to disassociate, Gail. So
no.
I'm really sorry. I'm gonna end things because I want to be mindful of everyone's time. Technically, our program ended 3 minutes ago. I'm sure all of us feel like we could sit and talk to you for hours, and I think you'll have people lining up to buy you a beer, and try to keep a dry eye. But we want to thank you again so much for taking time to talk to us.
Absolutely. My
I want to
pleasure.
thank everyone for being here. I will be sending a follow-up email, probably not today, tomorrow, with everyone's contact information. And I'll include a link to the video that we watched and a link to Scott's website. So you guys can follow up and subscribe if you feel so inclined. So thanks again to everyone. A little bit of chamber business. We have our 5K and our golf outing coming up. We've opened up registrations for those. They're on our website. Please check them out. And we have Women's Connection, not next week. Is it next week, Kathy? No, the following week. So just keep an eye on our social media and on our website for all event news. And we thank you guys for spending some of your time with us. And thank you, Scott.
Yep. Thank you guys. Have a great day.
Have a
See
good
ya.
one, everyone. Bye-bye.
Wake up. Close window.